One day, Arthur Phelps decided to sort through the attic, a task his wife had been nagging him about for years. The air was thick with dust and the scent of forgotten things. He wrestled a large leather-bound trunk out from under the eaves, its surface monogrammed with a faded W that was on part of any family name he knew. The lock was rusted shut, but a few hard whacks with a hammer sprung it open. Inside, nestled atop yellowed linens, was a single object, an old porcelain doll, its face finely crafted, its glass eyes a startlingly vivid blue. It wore a little blue dress and held a tiny, faded photograph. Arthur picked it up, a chill inexplicably running down his spine. The doll's head turned with a soft, gritty crunch of aged porcelain, its gaze fixing on a spot just over his shoulder. He laughed at his own jumpiness. A nervous, dry sound in the silent attic. He set the doll aside on a rocking chair and turned back to the trunk, pulling out the linens to shake off the dust. For the next hour, he worked, the doll watching from the chair. He found himself speaking to it, making dry jokes about the fashions of the 1920s. What do you think? Bit frumpy for your taste. The doll, of course, said nothing. But when Arthur turned to grab a box, he saw it from the corner of his eye. The tiny faded photograph it had been holding was now on the floorboards beside the chair. He frowned, picking it up. It was a picture of a young girl standing in front of this very house. He shrugged, assuming it had just slipped from the doll's ceramic fingers. He tucked it back into place and went back to work. 10 minutes later, he heard a faint scraping sound. He turned. The doll was now facing the small attic window, its back to him. The photograph was on the floor again, closer to the trunk this time. Arthur's blood ran cold. This wasn't possible. He walked slowly to the doll, his heart hammering. He picked up the photograph. The image had changed. The young girl was still there, but now she was no longer alone. A tall, gaunt figure in a dark coat stood behind her, its hand on her shoulder. Its face was a blurred smudge, but Arthur could feel its empty gaze. A putrid smell, like old meat and damp soil, filled the attic. With a trembling hand, he turned the doll to face him. Its glass eyes were no longer blue. They were a deep, void-like black, and from them, two thin trails of a dark, viscous fluid seeped down its porcelain cheeks. Dripping onto its little blue dress, its rosebud mouth, once fixed in a serene smile, had twisted into a grimace of utter malice. The air grew freezing. A whisper, dry as dead leaves, brushed against his ear, though his was no one there. "You let me out." Arthur stumbled back, dropping the doll. It hit the floorboards with a crack, but did not break. It lay there, its black eyes staring up at him, the horrifying photograph still clutched in its tiny hand. He scrambled for the attic door, his breath coming in ragged gasps, and slammed it shut, turning the old key in the lock. He stood on the landing, trembling, listening. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, from the other side of the door, he heard it, the soft, scraping sound of tiny porcelain fingers, slowly, patiently, beginning to scratch at the wood.